What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the Oak Tree Football channel. A few days ago, I did my first college football video on the channel, and I said there would be more, and here is another one today. I'll be doing my first college football predictions for the 2020 to 2021 season, maybe a bit too early. I'm going to be starting from 25 and working my way up, so let's get right into it. Before we get into the top 25, here are some honorable mentions that just missed this list, but I could still see them being in the top 25. Some honorable mentions are Baylor, California, Memphis, Utah, Wake Forest, Louisville, Kentucky, Indiana, UCF, Boise State, and Iowa. Now let's start with number 25. At number 25, I have Florida State. I know this is going to surprise a lot of people, and I know a lot of people won't agree with me, but hear me out. They hired Mike Norvell, who is a really good coach from Memphis, and Chuba Purdy can be good if he plays. They also have a really good receiver in Tamori and Terry, and Hamza Siljarine is a really good safety. He had 2 interceptions and 101 tackles this past year, and I think defensive tackle Marvin Wilson can be like the Derrick Brown of the 2021 draft class. Florida State has solid pieces on offense, and I think they can have a top defense. They also have a good coach. I know they need help at some positions, but the stars are aligning for Florida State, and even though they will probably lose a few games, I think Florida State will return to the top 25 this year. Next up, at number 24, I have Arizona State. Arizona State started the season very well last year, but didn't end that great. They had a big win against Oregon later in the year, though, and I think they could win some more big games this season. They lost running back Eno Benjamin and wide receiver Brandon Ayuk, but Jaden Daniels is going into his sophomore season, and I think he can play really well. They have a few good pieces on defense, and like I said, I think they could have a very, very good season. At number 23, I have Tennessee. The Volunteers started last season 2-5, but then they won 6 games in a row and ended the season with an 8-5 record. I think they can continue that streak into this season, and other than games against highly ranked opponents, they will probably win all their games. They have 4 tough games, and I think they will probably lose those, but the others don't seem too tough. They are losing some important pieces like Jawan Jennings and Darrell Taylor, but I still think Tennessee can have a good season. At number 22, I have Iowa State. Iowa State only had a 7-6 record last season, but a lot of their games they lost were only by a few points. They lost to Iowa by 1 point, they lost to Baylor by 2 points, they lost to Oklahoma State by a touchdown, and they lost to Oklahoma by 1 point. Brock Purdy had a pretty good season last year, and he could get even better this year. Their defense isn't great, but their offense could be good enough to have them be ranked this season. Coming in at number 21, I have Texas A&M. I think Texas A&M could go higher than this, but there are some games on their schedule that I think they will lose, like Auburn, Alabama, and LSU. But other than that, they have a pretty easy schedule. They will probably be a 3-loss team this season because those teams are too tough for them. I think Kellen Mond could be solid this year, and sophomore running back Isaiah Spiller nearly hit 1,000 rush yards last season, and I think he could hit that total this year. The receivers need to have some better production, though, and same with the defensive players. If all things go right, A&M could have a good season, but if not, who knows what will happen. Coming in at number 20, I have the University of Cincinnati. Cincinnati has an incredibly easy schedule, their hardest game probably being either against UCF or Memphis. They could definitely go undefeated because I'm pretty sure they're the best team in the American Conference. I think they might lose one game, but I think they will win the American Championship. 2 of the 3 losses this past season were against Memphis, but I think they will be able to beat them this year. They are losing their 1,000-yard rusher Michael Warren, but I still think Cincinnati can have a pretty good season. At number 19, I have Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech was 1 game short of the ACC championship game this year, and I think they could either make it there or be very close this season. Hendon Hooker played quarterback at the end of the year, and he was pretty solid. They didn't really have a great rusher or receiver, but their defense was mostly their strong point. Linebackers Rashard Asby had 119 tackles, and Caleb Farley had 4 interceptions. There are some good pieces for Virginia Tech, and they could have a very good season. At number 18, I have North Carolina. I could definitely see North Carolina being higher than this. Sam Howell could have a really, really good season. Since he had such a great one as a freshman, it'll probably improve in his second year. Running back Michael Carter had his first 1,000-yard rushing season last year, and they had two 1,000-yard receivers in Diami Brown and Das Newsome. On the defense, former quarterback Chaz Surratt had 115 tackles and 6.5 sacks. Other than their game against Auburn, North Carolina doesn't have that tough of a schedule. They don't lose anyone important, and they could have a really, really good year. Next up, at number 17, I have Michigan. I'm not sure how Ben Fry will play in his first season as quarterback, but the rest of the roster is pretty talented. The only problem is they have a tough schedule, playing Wisconsin and Penn State, and Jim Harbaugh hasn't been able to prove that he can beat Ohio State yet. I can't see them winning those games, and that's why I think they'll be at number 17. At number 16, I have Texas. Like I said in my Heisman Trophy prediction, I expect Texas to have a pretty good season. I think Sam Ehlinger can have a pretty good year, and same with some other players. One thing you notice about Texas if you watch them from last season is they had a lot of trouble tackling. Their whole team needs to step up if they want to have a good season. Their team leader in sacks only had 5 sacks last year, and their leader in receiving yards that is returning this season only had 522 yards. If some of their players can step up, they could be a great team, but if they can't, there will be problems for Texas this season. At number 15, I have Oklahoma State. A big reason I think Oklahoma State will be pretty highly ranked this year is running back Chuba Hubbard. Hubbard is probably a top 3 ranked running back in college football, and I expect him to have a really good season. Spencer Sanders really didn't have the best freshman season, so we're going to need to see a step up from him. They also have a top receiver in Tylan Wallace, but he needs to have a pretty good year if he wants to be drafted early in next year's draft. And if Sanders steps up, I think he could have a really good year. Safety Colby Harley-Peel had 5 interceptions last season and could have another good year this season. They have some tough games like Oklahoma and Texas, but I still think that Oklahoma State can have a very good season. Coming in at number 14, I have Wisconsin. Wisconsin is losing arguably the best player in Jonathan Taylor, but they still have some solid players. If they're going to play well, though, Jack Cohen needs to have a better season. Jonathan Taylor was basically their entire offense, and even though they had a receiver who had over 900 receiving yards, they won't have him this year as Quintus Cephas went to the draft. Like I said, Cohen needs to step up, and it's not going to help that a center also went to the draft. Their defense didn't get much better either, as Zach Bond went to the draft. One player, though, who did stay is middle linebacker Chris Orr. In 2019, Orr had 78 tackles, 14 of them for loss, and 11.5 sacks. He will need to have a great season if Wisconsin will have a good year like I expect them to. At number 13, I have Minnesota. Minnesota's coming off one of their best seasons in a while, and one big part of that is Tanner Morgan emerged as a really good quarterback. They're losing a top receiver in Tyler Johnson, but Rashad Bateman can be a really good player now that he'll be the number 1. They are also losing Antoine Winfield Jr., which might be a problem. I don't think they have the best defense, and that's why I don't think they'll be higher ranked than number 13. At number 12 is USC. USC has a very talented quarterback in Keaton Slovis. As a freshman, he had over 3,000 pass yards and 30 passing touchdowns. They're losing one of their top receivers in Michael Pittman Jr., but they still have some good players. They had a really poor recruiting class, which is worrying, but heading into the year, they have some great pieces. I think Amon-Ra St. Brown can be a really good receiver, and the same with Tyler Vaughns. They have solid players on the defensive side of the ball also, and if they do everything right, they can have a really good season. At number 11, I have Notre Dame. I don't think Notre Dame will have a season like they did in 2018 where they made the college football playoff, but I could definitely see them having a good year. Last season was the best numbers Ian Book has put up in his career, and he might be able to do that again this year. It'll hurt that they lost Chase Claypool, but I can still see Ian Book having a really good season and leading Notre Dame to the 11th best team in the country. At number 10, I have the University of Auburn. I think Auburn could have a surprise season and maybe finish even higher than 10th. I think Bo Nix can have a huge step up in his second year and maybe even be a candidate for the Heisman Trophy. Jartavius Whitlow is a very talented running back, and I think Seth Williams could be one of the best receivers in college football. They are losing Derek Brown, but they still have some decent players on the defensive line. Auburn also had one of the best recruiting classes in football, and they should be able to have a highly ranked team this year. At number 9, I have Florida. Florida's a really good team. They're just in a tough SEC. Kyle Trask can have a big step up in his second season, and Kyle Pitts is one of the best tight ends in college football. They are losing top cornerback C.J. Henderson, but Florida has a really solid all-around roster and could be a very good team this season. At number 8, I have Penn State. Other than Yetur Gross-Matos and KJ Hamler, Penn State isn't losing anyone too important, and I think they have a pretty simple schedule other than Ohio State. I think Sean Clifford can step up, and getting Journey Brown back will be a big help. Pat Freiermuth, in my opinion, is one of the best tight ends in college football, and on the defensive side of the ball, they have one of the best linebackers in Micah Parsons. It's really going to come down to that Ohio State game. If they can win, I think they can go to the college football playoff. If they lose, though, I think they're going to be at number 8 right at this spot. Coming in at number 7, I have Oklahoma. Oklahoma is having their 4th quarterback in 4 years, but Lincoln Riley has shown he can have any quarterback fit his system. He's had 2 quarterbacks win the Heisman, and 1 got second place in the past 3 years. They are losing some big pieces like Trey Sermon, CeeDee Lamb, and Kenneth Murray, but they still have some good players like Kennedy Brooks and Charleston Rambo. Spencer Rattler was one of the top quarterback recruits a year ago, and I think he could have a good season in both the running game and the passing game. Their defense doesn't look great, but I think their offense can be enough to get them a very high rank. Coming in at number 6, I have defending national champions LSU. LSU is coming off a national championship, and they could still go back to the college football playoff, but they're losing a huge amount of good players. Joe Burrow, Caleb Chason, Justin Jefferson, Patrick Queen, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Grant Delpit, Christian Fulton, Damian Lewis, and many more starters left for the draft. No matter what, though, they still have some good players, including top receiver Jamar Chase and top cornerback Derek Stingley Jr. Miles Brennan probably isn't going to be as good as Joe Burrow, but he can still be solid since he has Jamar Chase and Terrence Marshall. Ed Orgeron is one of the best coaches in college football, and I think a loss to Alabama will have them as the 6th-ranked team in the country. At number 5, I have the University of Alabama. The only reason I think Bama will miss out on the playoffs this season is because I think they will lose twice to Georgia, once in the regular season and once in the SEC championship. Mac Jones can be good, Najee Harris will probably get a lot of carries, and they still have 2 top receivers in Devonta Smith and Jalen Waddle. Dylan Moses is coming back on defense, and they also have a really good cornerback in Patrick Surtain. They have some tough games on the schedule, but I expect them to win most of them. I could see Bama being 4th place over the next team, but right now I think they'll end up in 5th. Now going into the top 4. At number 4, I have the University of Oregon. Oregon really only has 1 tough game this season, which is the one against Ohio State. I think they will lose, but it can be close. All the other games should be pretty easily winnable for them. CJ Verdell is one of my favorite college football players, and I think he will help out whoever plays quarterback for them. They have some good players on defense, like Kayvon Thibodeau, and on offense they have Johnny Johnson at wide receiver. I think finally Oregon can take the next step and be a part of the college football playoff. At number 3, I have the University of Georgia. I think this will be the year Georgia returns to the college football playoff. I think Jamie Newman will be very good for them, and they just have a good roster all around. Todd Monken is their new offensive coordinator, and I think their receiver George Pickens could have a great season. Azeez Ojulari could be fantastic this year, but it really depends if they beat Alabama and win in the SEC championship game. I think they will do that, and I believe there will be a top team in college football this season. Now, the top 2. Just like in the Heisman Trophy video, I could see either of these being number 1, and I could see either of them being number 2. But in the end, I decided to go with, at number 2, I have Ohio State University. I think Ohio State University has one of the best offenses in college football this year. Justin Fields will be back, and they got Trey Sermon to replace J.K. Dobbins, and they already had Master Teague anyway. They're getting their receiver Olave back, and they got one of the top recruits in the country who was a wide receiver. I'm a bit worried about their defense, though. Chase Young and Jeffrey Okudah are both going to the draft, but I still think Ohio State will be the number 2 team in the country. And of course, at number 1, I have Clemson. Right now, Clemson is who I think will win the national championship. I think their roster is too good, and I don't think anyone will be better than them. Trevor Lawrence can be one of the best quarterbacks in college football and can be in the race for the Heisman Trophy. He's also been able to prove himself as not only a passer but also as a runner. Travis Etienne decided to play for Clemson for one more season, and they still have great wide receivers. They are losing T. Higgins, but they still have Justin Ross and Amari Rogers. They also still have some good pieces on defense, but they are losing Isaiah Simmons, which could be a bit of a problem. Clemson did have one of, if not the best recruiting class in the country, and I think they will be one of the top teams in college football this season. That's going to do it for this video. If you enjoyed, don't forget to leave a like, and if you're new around here, don't forget to subscribe and turn notifications on so you're always notified when I make a new video. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.